Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Chad Miller, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Austin, Texas. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about ways leaders can shape their company culture. And really, beyond the theoretical, the philosophical, we're really going to drill down to practical ways that we can start to do this today. Like, what can we do to go back to our workplaces today with our teams to start shaping company culture? Because I truly believe that this is one of the most important things that leaders can and should be doing each and every day as a part of their role as a leader within their organization. So often, leaders get caught up in the daily grind. They get caught up, running around like a chicken with their head cut off, putting out fires. And obviously, that's part of the gig, right? You do have to respond to emergencies. You do have to put out fires. You do have to make sure the train runs on time, that kind of stuff, right? But, and a good leader is thinking strategically. A good leader is shaping culture. A good leader is developing their people, and thinking into the future, trying to develop things so that you can be productive preemptively for what's going to happen down the road. And so I think that company culture piece is really a foundational component for all of that. So we're going to unpack all of this and discuss this as we go through our conversation today. As we get started, I wanted to share Chad's bio with everybody. Chad loves to help others live life abundantly and experiencing increased purpose, joy, and success, creating environments where leaders and their employees thrive by bringing together insights and lessons learned from 10 plus years in corporate leadership for Fortune 500 companies, a master's degree in organizational leadership, and another in ministry and theology, and 20 plus years of adventure and service all over the world. He enjoys a good craft beer and spending time with his amazing wife, Kate, their 3 dogs, 2 birds, and a horse, and their family of friends. I love all of that. That's beautiful. It's a pleasure to be with you. Anything you would like to add by way of your background or personal context before we launch on in?
Oh, you've covered it well. I'm excited to talk on the topic. Like you say, I think it's a real differentiator for organizations, and I'm excited to dive in today.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's start with just a general background to this idea of company culture and why you feel it's important.
Yeah, sure. So it all started for me with corporate. I worked originally in IT, sort of a very people assume an HR background or something like that. But
Yeah.
no, I worked in IT in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 13 years. And I really saw there the difference that culture can make in attracting and retaining talent, engaging talent. I went to work for a company, thought I might work there 3 to 5 years, and ended up staying over 12 because I had a good team, a good boss, and a good culture. And so I realized there what a powerful impact that can have on the employee's experience and on the overall organization's productivity.
Yeah, it really does make all the difference, right? So, especially in tech, it's very common that you go in, 3 to 5 is even kind of a long time in tech these days, right? And so oftentimes you go in, for a year or two, and then you're kind of expected to transition. And in some cases, companies think there's something wrong with you if you're not transitioning after a couple of years, right? And so to go find a home where you feel at home, you feel like you have a great team, it's just dynamic, it's energizing, you feel supported. It's a place where you don't want to leave, and that you're not only staying for 3 to 5 years, but you're staying for 12 years. That really says something. That is a differentiator, and that has a huge impact, on the organization. There's institutional knowledge there. You're not having that revolving door of people coming in, getting trained, meshing with the team, only to then turn around and leave, right? And you're constantly going through that process. There's a lot of power there. There's a lot of I mean, frankly, from a bottom line standpoint, there's a lot of cost savings there. There's a lot of value in having that kind of a dynamic, and yet a lot of organizations are really quite fine with the revolving door approach. And I suppose, I guess, ultimately it depends on your strategy, but you know, there's tons of research that demonstrates when you have a compelling, engaging culture where people feel welcome, safe, they feel a sense of belonging, and they feel, you know, that like you, that they want to be there. They bring their best selves to their work. They are more productive. They're more creative and innovative. The organization benefits, not just from, you know, kind of the collective benefits generally, but like bottom line benefits. They're more profitable. They have better customer retention, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right?
That was the start of my journey, and that got me thinking about it. And then as I got into the master's program and was researching all the research that you mentioned, I started to see, like the Society for Human Resource Management talking about over $220 billion in cost of toxic workplaces.
Mm,
Gallup finding over $8 trillion lost due to poor culture or low employee engagement. Yeah, like you say, it hits very big numbers really quick in organizations of any size. I've seen numbers that vary, but cost anywhere from 25 to 2x an employee's salary when you lose them. And
yeah.
we know that some of the biggest reasons that employees leave is because of poor relationships with their managers, poor workplace cultures, team dynamics that are discouraging, frustrating to them. All of these things tie back to culture and the leaders that shape these. Yeah, I mean, it can make huge differences in attracting and retaining the talent, which then, like you say, it just multiplies. The effects multiply. The cost savings hitting, increasing the bottom line or improving the return there, but also the innovation. With you leading human capital innovation, that innovation component, culture is such a big driver for that. And for teams that want to be at the cutting edge of their industries, it's really key and does become a differentiator in every way. And of course, setting them aside from all of their competition, just in the way that they, again, create that work environment that's best of breed, best place to work, and really helps those companies springboard to be those award-winning type companies.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's bottom line benefits. So there's the business case for it is super, super clear. There's so much research on this over years and decades that the bottom line benefits are huge. So the business case is clear. But there's a very clear human case to this too. So lest we be accused of just being cold-hearted capitalists, like from a human perspective, this benefits everyone also. Like, so, you know, if I'm also a warm-hearted guy, like I want to do right by people. I want to treat people with dignity and respect. I want people to feel a genuine sense of belonging. I want them to feel needed, wanted, welcome in the workplace. I want them to be able to bring their whole selves to their work and feel meaning and purpose. And I want them to be able to contribute in meaningful ways, right? I want them to be self-actualized, and I want them, to really just be excited to wake up in the morning and to show up to work. That's going to bring out the best in them, right? And what
Totally.
we're talking about when we have a dynamic culture, that happens. That brings the best out of people. And so then it becomes this dynamic environment where ultimately, from the human side, it's empowering and it's powerful. And so yes, you have better bottom line outcomes. The business case is strong, but the human dynamic is powerful. And it's, even if, I mean, people need money to survive and to pay the mortgage and to put food on the table and to help their kids go to college and all that kind of stuff, right? But even if we were in like a society where we just didn't need the money and you could strip the money away, in that kind of a dynamic, people would still willingly show up to work, right? Because it's invigorating, it's exciting, and the intrinsic motivators are there. And so, thinking about those human elements, I think is also equally as exciting when we think about a positive culture.
Yeah, 100%. That's actually what got me into this business. And my consulting business is called Life Abundant Leadership. People
Mm,
hear that. I've even talked with people about how it's maybe not the best name because people get caught up on and I do business consulting. They hear that life abundant part at the beginning and they think I do life coaching or whatever, which
hmm.
may factor in. But the reason I named it that is because of what you mentioned. My goal and my drive and my motivating factors for doing this work are helping people thrive and succeed. It's that people impact that you mentioned. And I do the business consulting to help improve that because, like you say, it does have such a big impact. I mean, for most of us, we spend at least half of our waking hours at
Right.
work. What
Yeah.
bigger impact can we have on our overall lives than improving our work environment? When work is better, life is better. And not just, like you say, financially. Obviously, if people are getting the means to support their families and all of that, but the meaning and the impact and the purpose, all of these things, when people experience that in the workplace, it's transformational. And that's what really motivates me, drives me, what motivates the leaders that I love to work with. I actually came to all the sort of financial impacts that we talked about a moment ago, sort of as secondary, because, I would talk with certain folks and leaders that weren't aware. Especially, I see it more in small to mid-sized businesses in more rural areas. Or, when I was in the Bay Area, culture was all successful companies knew that it was key, knew that it was important, knew that it was valuable, and they were invested in shaping that culture. But for some of the organizations I've worked with, as I started working with smaller to mid-sized businesses, sometimes they are just focused, as you mentioned, on the dollar. And I had to help them see that, yes, this will impact the dollar in all those impactful ways. But yeah, for me, what initiated that interest and drives the motivation is that people impact because it can be so transformative and impactful on everybody involved, customers, employees, leaders, the whole chain of the business gets positively impacted with a great culture.
Yeah, yeah. So I hopefully, if we haven't beaten a dead horse here, it's crystal clear, to everyone in the audience that culture is king, and culture eats strategy for breakfast, as the saying goes, right?
Yep. Peter
It's just
Drucker.
super important. It's the foundation. It's the foundation to everything that we try to do. I was reading, I can't remember who wrote it. It was someone, trying to be provocative, I'm sure. My guess is if I sat down with this person and actually had a conversation, they would probably admit that yes, culture is important. But I was reading a LinkedIn article a while back, maybe 6 months ago or so, and the premise of their article, again, I can't remember who wrote it, but the premise of the article was basically they didn't believe in culture. Culture is basically a waste of time. You're just going to be chasing your tail. Why are we spending all this time and energy thinking about culture and trying to develop and shape culture? How do we think we're God and that we can just like influence something as ethereal as culture? That was the premise. And like, let's stop wasting all of our time and energy trying to shape culture. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. And so let's just focus on what we can actually control. That was the idea, right? That was the premise. Um, and the whole time I'm just thinking of, you know, our discipline, like organizational leadership, organizational behavior, like all the stuff we study and we practice as consultants and we teach, there's a whole science behind this. Like yes, culture exists. Yes, there are things we can do to influence it. And we don't have to just sit back and just accept what naturally emerges. And yes, something will naturally emerge. Anytime you get two or more people together in a group, human beings will develop a culture. Like it's a sociological fact that like a culture will emerge. And the question is, will it be a healthy, dynamic, positive culture, or will it be a less than healthy culture? And unfortunately, given human nature, more often than not, left to our own devices, if we don't put in mechanisms to like steer it in a healthy direction, unfortunately, often it will go in an unhealthy direction. So it behooves
Yes.
us to try to shape it, right? And there are things we can do to shape it. And if we go into a place that has an unhealthy culture, there are things we can do to disrupt that unhealthy culture and to shape it and to change it into a more healthy culture. And that is something I believe at my core. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, right? And anyway, so I was reading that article and I'm just kind of like, beating my head against the wall, thinking, what in the world? Are there really people that believe this, or is this guy just being provocative, trying to get clicks and trying to get people to read it? Ultimately, I don't know. But that's what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about is like really for people like him, if they really do believe that, like what would you say to them? Like what can we really do? Like actionable things to prove them wrong? Like what can we do in simple ways every day as leaders to go back to our teams to actually start making a measurable difference. So it's not just
Yeah.
like, not because I'm guessing part of the reason why he was saying this is because probably over his career, he's seen failed attempt after failed attempt for organization-wide culture change. They bring in a big price consultant, they spend a year, maybe multiple years, millions of dollars to do some big, huge change initiative, and nothing really happens, right? He's probably seen that over and over again. And yeah, a lot of times those things don't work. A lot of times those things fail. Does that mean that they can't work? Does that mean that you can't have influence, especially at the more micro level? I don't believe so. And so, yeah, especially at the micro level, what can we do within our sphere of influence to have an influence on culture? Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, I would have to agree with him to a point. Culture, all the efforts that can be spent on it can be a waste when you only go part way. Like when
Yeah,
people give I sometimes call it lip service. They'll
sure.
say that, oh, we want to do something with culture, but they only like go part way and they don't follow through is key. Follow through is a
Yeah,
must. Like
yeah,
if they it starts, you mentioned the micro level, and I think we'll get to that, but starting at the macro level, they've got to have a good mission, vision, values. If an organization doesn't have that, that's where I always start with them. Problem is, most people, that's as far as they take it. And then they think, oh, we did some culture work because we defined some values. And if all you do is make mission statements and values, you put them on posters on the wall in the employee handbook, of course that's going to be a waste. Like, because it's not really rubber hitting the road. And so what you keyed
and can
in
I say
on is it's
also,
got to, yeah, go ahead.
can I say also, not only is that not enough, and it can be a waste of time in that, you bring in the consultant, you spend the day retreat, and you have the all hands strategy meeting, and you come up with the values and all that kind of stuff, and it can be an exercise, a good activity, whatever. But um ultimately, if it ends there, it can be a waste. It can also be a detriment, right? Because
Yes,
then the rest of the people in your organization, they now see these espoused values, they see even these aspirational goals and values, and then they don't see congruency, and they see
totally. It
that you're not in
backfires.
alignment, and then they see, oh, we're just hypocrites, like we're not even trying to live up to these values, and it actually ends up hurting you rather than helping you.
Very much so. I hit on that every time. When I talk through these things, I say, yeah, like beware because this can backfire. Yeah, if you only go part way, if you don't live the values, the mission statement that you say you're about, like you say, employees know it, they see the hypocrisy and it backfires. I use an example of, calling out a couple great values. I think communication, teamwork, integrity. I forget the exact list, but I'll name off four and I say, does this sound like a good team, a good organization? And they say, yes. I say, those are the values of Enron. The
Right.
problem is they didn't live it. And so, yes, so the next thing, and getting to your question about the micro level, that is the key. Going from the values to the behaviors and the fundamentals of rituals that will build in those values into the day to day, week to week, lived experience of the employees. Um, when I worked corporate, the company I worked with, we were clients of this organization called CultureWise, and we used
Yeah.
their program, what they call their operating system for culture, to work on it. And what it is from the values. identifying the behaviors that drive those values, and then the rituals that you can tie those into on a day-to-day basis. And I saw it have a significant impact within our organization. And so when I started my consulting business, they were the first company I contacted to get licensed to implement their system. And for folks listening, I'd say a book, Culture by Design. And this
Mm,
goes back to what you were talking about culture will develop on its own. It'll be what it'll be. But if you let it be what it will be, as you pointed out, it's likely to not be good. I call it the culture degradation principle. Left
yeah.
to its own devices, even if you start with a good culture, as the company grows and get people get further away from the sort of origin story and the ethos that maybe originated the company, it will degrade. I call it the boulder rolling down the hill.
Yeah.
But if you continually fuel culture by investing in it, by working on it, by driving it with very tangible, practical actions, then it becomes the steam train that's pulling the organization uphill instead of the boulder pulling it downhill. But that takes that intentionality.
Yeah. And that's a really, really important word, that intentionality. And coming back to kind of at the macro level, these values, the mission statement, the value statement, and having the espoused and aspirational values, nobody expects you to be perfect. Everyone knows that you're not always going to completely live up to them. That's partially why they're aspirational, right? You shoot for the moon, and you don't reach it, but you hit the treetops. That kind of a saying. And people get it. Like nobody expects perfection, but they do expect you to strive for it, and they can tell when you're not striving for it. And the Enron example is perfect. Because clearly, they were giving lip service, and everyone who has studied Enron knows that they were doing all the outward things. They were giving lip service, and it was all a facade. And you go into Enron, and it wasn't just everyone knows about Enron cooking the books, right? And the financial stuff and the accounting and the fraud and all that kind of stuff, right? It wasn't just that though. Like if you really study Enron, it was toxic workplace environment, toxic leadership, toxic culture. I mean, they had like sexual harassment stuff going on up the wazoo, like all the like classic things you can think of like a toxic workplace. That was Enron, including cooking the books and like all that stuff, right? So they were like doing
A
everything
lot of it
wrong.
goes together.
Yeah,
Totally.
they were doing everything wrong. But on the outside, it looked fantastic because they just had a whole house of cards. They had a whole facade built up. And people know the difference, right? Inside. And so you have to work at it to try to actually live up to it. Nobody expects perfection, right? So just
Yeah.
do your best and acknowledge it when you come up short, you own up to it, and then debrief and try to figure out what you can do better next time. And that's what
Yeah.
people want. And then at
Yeah.
the micro level, just be real with each other, and like you said, systematize those values. One example, Johnson and Johnson. Johnson and Johnson's not perfect as an organization either, and they've had, especially over the last couple of years, they've had some PR hits, around some of the things that they've done. But historically, Johnson and Johnson has been held up as an example of a company that's really stood up for its values, and a company that's really done a good job of systematizing its values, building it into the onboarding process, building it into its performance management system, building it into the various mechanisms of the day-to-day lived experience of the employees and the artifacts of the organization, right? And
Yeah.
that's what it takes. That's what it takes. And when you don't have those types of elements, then it just defaults to whatever ends up happening. And that's where the degradation often happens, like you were describing.
Two words you mentioned that I'd key in on. You mentioned the aspirational values or goals. And Patrick Lencioni warns about having aspirational values or goals. If they're truly just that, that's where you can sort of get some of that backfiring. You aspire to it, but you're not actually living by those values. And he points out that they need to be lived values in lived behaviors. And so, like, if you're going to say something's a value, like you mentioned, you need to hire and fire by it. You need to have teams operating around it. It needs to be integrated into your weekly meetings where you're making decisions based off those values. So, definitely, yes. Just wanted to mention some warnings, like you say, about it being purely aspirational. It's got to be something that you are making decisions by, acting on, etc. But then you also mentioned the systematization of
Yeah.
these values. And that is, yes, that's where we try and get into the behaviors and the rituals. So if
Yeah.
one of the values is teamwork, well, what does that look like? What do we mean by teamwork? What are the behaviors that we want to see driving that on a Tuesday morning? What does that look like in my meetings? What does that look like for my clients and partners that we work with? If one of the values is integrity, one that's way too broad, all too often used, what does that look like? Again, how do we take action on it? What does integrity look like in this company, in our context, for our teams? We need to get to that deeper level and then build it into systems. There's a book, Atomic Habits. James Clear, talks
Yeah.
about we don't rise to the level of our goals or aspirations. We fall to the level of our systems. So if companies don't have systems in place where they are intentionally working towards and shaping that culture, reinforcing the culture, then yeah, it falls to people's worst, habits when they, come in and work. It's hard. They're under rested, overworked, burnt out. If we don't have systems in place that are reinforcing this, it's going to degrade over time for sure, and not be achieve all the benefits that we talked about at the beginning. That really takes, I would say, taking that extra step. If you only go so far, I would say it's sort of like a J curve on the benefits. The
Yeah.
further a company goes in investing to this, they get exponential returns as that culture really goes from good to great to outstanding to world class. Those benefits just multiply exponentially on that steeper side versus when you're somewhere in the middle. That's where you start getting not the return that maybe executives are looking for.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. Well, Chad, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I know the time. I need to let you go here in just a minute, but we've only scratched the surface. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, sure. So connecting with me, LinkedIn is one of the best ways. Chad Miller is my name. Life Abundant Leadership is my business. If you search on those, you should find it. Lifeabundantleadership.com is my website. That can also link you there. So yeah, happy to connect with folks through that. Encouraging folks, like you said, intentionality is a great word for it. So I would encourage leaders to look at their systems, everything from onboarding, recruitment, on through to what are the performance management rituals that you have, what are the week to week meeting rituals, building it all the way through life cycle of the employee so that culture rubber's hitting the road on day to day, week to week with the employees. It'll make a huge difference, as we mentioned earlier, not only financially, but the human impact for the leader, for their employees, for their customers, all across the board. Let's make life better through better workplaces.
Amen. Well said, Chad. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Chad can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.